Hey guys, what's up? This is Pansar Dragon, and today we're doing an itemization guide for offensive items for bruisers and tanks and so on. First of all, this is more oriented to AD champions, and there will be another video for AP champions, but I just want to concentrate on items like Ravenous Hydra, Trinity Force, and kind of go in depth and give an analysis of it. And so this video is going to be oriented towards junglers and top laners who want to build offensively. Champions like Jarvan, Rengar, Riven do fit this category, so I think you guys know what I mean. And with all that being said, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I want to note is that usually if you're a tank or bruiser, unless the item is a core of your build, for instance, Jack should always get Trinity Force, usually the only times you will want to build offensively is when you're ahead. Unless you're like an assassin or all offense champion like Riven or Zed, then of course that rule does not apply to those kind of champions. Alright, so let's start talking about items, and the first item we'll be talking about is the Brutalizer. The Brutalizer is a great item with champions with high physical damage or want to burst people down. People like Jarvan will make great use of the Brutalizer, as his Q, R, and passive all have really high base damages, so he can make use of that. Someone like Jax is not suited to this item, as Jax is more suited to sustain damage rather than burst damage, and so basically you only get this item if your champion is an AD burst champion. The next item we'll be talking about is the Hex Drinker. This item is very optimal in situations where the enemy has small to large magic damage, just because of how cheap it is for the stats it gives, giving a 250 magic damage shield, 30 magic resist, and 25 attack damage, all for the price of 1,450 gold. This item is great for anyone who wants to be tanky while also wanting to do some damage. Having this item in lane against a magic damage user usually gives you a huge advantage over the enemy, and so basically if you want to build offensively and defensively at the same time, Hex Drinker is the item for you. Next item we'll be talking about is the Maw of Malmortius. This item is only good when you have nothing else to upgrade because 1. There are better items to build after you're done your Hex Drinker, and 2. The raw stats that this item gives without the passive isn't really that strong. So it's better off to leave it at the Hex Drinker until it's the last item you have to upgrade. The next item is going to be the Black Cleaver. This item is great to get when your other allies do physical damage and you want to kind of help them do more physical damage. It's also great for champions who can do a lot of ticks of damage with physical damage. For instance, Wukong's ultimate is AoE and does a tick of damage every second. Who I would not recommend getting this on would be someone like Sion. His whole combo, which would be R, Q, and then an auto attack, would only apply 3 Black Cleaver stacks in like 3 seconds. It's also good for champions who also want to be more tankier and they have the Brutalizer in their inventory, so they built the Black Cleaver for the 250 extra health. Also, a general note when buying this item is you shouldn't rush it because enemies won't have armor until like mid game or late game, and so this item is better to build once the enemy starts getting some armor and there's armor to shred. The next item we'll be talking about is the other variant for Brutalizer, which is the Ghost Blade. This item is great for 1v1ers, chasers, and auto attackers. You want to think of champions who can make use of the attack speed buff while also needing the extra movement speed to take down their enemies. Assassins make great use of the active with the movement speed buff since they can get to their target faster and then burst them down. Champions I would get this on would be people like Rengar, Talon, Master Yi, and champions I wouldn't get this on would be champions like Pantheon, who doesn't really auto attack and more uses his skills. And same goes with Lee Sin. He doesn't auto attack that much in team fights, he just basically uses his skills to do the damage. And most AD carries can make great use of this item too, as long as they have base damage, and since they are AD carries they can always make use of the attack speed plus movement speed buff. The most effective one who makes use of this is Grace because of his extremely high base damages. But of course most AD carries would like to go sustain damage, so they go Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer. Next item we'll be talking about is the Last Whisper. So I think a lot of you guys are thinking, why is Brutalizer plus the Last Whisper a good combination? The reason behind this is because Riot changed the way armor penetration plus magic penetration works. The way it works is that percent armor penetration comes first, and then flat armor penetration comes after the percentage is applied, and so it just has really good synergy with each other. So that's the reason behind that. It's also worth to note that you shouldn't go Brutalizer straight to Last Whisper. You always need an item in between, so Tiamat or Infinity Edge. You need attack damage to complement the armor penetration that you're getting. Unless of course you're facing a 250 armor Malphite, then by all means go Brutalizer to Last Whisper. You will also get this eventually since the enemies will start building armor, and when that time comes, you already have the Last Whisper. The next item we'll be talking about is the Tiamat. This item is only good when you can fit the active in your skill combo. For instance, Rengar can use his in the air while he's leaping, Riven can do it in between her skills and auto attacks, and for Jarvan, he can activate it in midair when he's using his EQ. Now champions I would not consider getting this on would be champions like Vi and Xin Zhao. Why is that, you may ask? Because with Vi, you want to get your 3 proc off your W, and she also has an auto attack reset, so by using the active from Ravenous Hydra or Tiamat, you're going to be delaying her W proc, and in general there's also just better items for her. And as for Xin Zhao, the same thing kind of applies there too. You want to get your 3 Q procs off so that they get in midair and CC them. It's also a better item for champions who just want to burst their enemies, as if you just think about it, it's basically a secondary spell on your items that has a 1.0 AD ratio on it. The next item we'll be talking about is the Ravenous Hydra, which is upgrade from Tiamat. So basically, if you want to get some lifesteal and you have Tiamat, then you upgrade it into this. But there is different synergy with the Ravenous Hydra as opposed with Tiamat. For instance, synergy with people who have innate lifesteal like Lee Sin and Nasus will make great use of this item since they do have the lifesteal to provide for the passive and active. Champions who wouldn't need this item is someone like Rengar, since he is basically going to one-shot the enemy carries. And same with Talon, he doesn't need lifesteal, he just needs to kill his target and his job is done. Of course, once you're done a bunch of your items, then you can complete this. Although someone like Fiora or Riven are a bit different since their survivability is by using their shield or lifestealing off the enemy. The next item we'll be talking about is the Trinity Force, and this item is optimal for people who can constantly proc the Sheen or don't have the best AD ratios. So, for instance, Jax can keep proccing it with his W, Aurelia can keep proccing it with her ultimate, and Vi can keep proccing it with her E. Also, all of these champions do have some sort of AP ratio on them, so they can make use of the AP that is given. And someone I would not get this on would be someone like Wukong or Riven. These two characters have really high AD ratios, so there's no point of getting a Trinity Force, which only gives 30 AD. Next item we'll be talking about is the Bloodthirster, and basically this item is only good for Riven or combined with Ravenous Hydra, although it's not optimal to get a lot of lifesteal since there are probably other stats you could probably be getting with other items. But this is just an example of what you could combine it with. This is also an AD carry item, and so since they're the ones who will be auto attacking and lifestealing, it's meant for them. And it's not really meant for bruisers or tanks. Riven is a special case because she kind of relies on lifestealing and shields for her survivability. So the next item we'll be talking about is the Blade of Ruin King, which is an item meant for split pushers, 1v1ers, and for auto attackers who have low AD ratios. So I think a prime example I remember was people were suggesting that you should probably build Blade of Ruin King on Sion when he was in PvE. And the reason it was bad on him was because he never auto attacked when he was alive. Of course, when he was dead, he would auto attack a lot, and I could see it being useful then, but your prime focus shouldn't be dying, it should be staying alive. A special case is Zed, who has high AD ratios, but the thing is, he gets a lot of utility from the active, and of course, the active burst does apply to his death mark. The next item we'll be talking about is the Wit's End, and you would only get this if you have other magic damage, you're an auto attacker, and you need magic resist. So a prime example is Warwick. His ultimate does magic damage, his Q does magic damage, and so does his passive, so he makes the greatest use of Wit's End. Someone I would not get this on would be someone like Aurelia. She would probably make better use of, say, Trinity Force or Blade of Ruin King, and then getting magic resist right after. The only way this item is good is if you have other magic damage, otherwise it's just too expensive for the stats that it gives. The next item we'll be talking about is the Iceborne Gauntlet. So basically, this item is good for champions who can constantly proc Sheen and have AP ratios and want to be somewhat tanky. Or in other words, Ezreal, Nidalee, and Malphite. Some other considerations would be Kassadin or Fizz, but the reason you don't get it on them is because they have really high AP ratios, so it's better to get Lichbane and more AP items on them. Alright, so we're going to be listing some champions and what to build on certain champions against certain team comps. But the difference between this video and the defensive itemization guide video is that if you're building offense, you're probably ahead and you want to build the best offensive item for a certain champion. while with the defensive itemization guide video, you have to consider what the enemy's team comp was. So instead I'll be just explaining why a certain item goes good with a certain champion. So for instance, let's say we have Trundle top, and we have a Spirit Visage and Mercury Treads because we're facing Rumble and Orianna. And we got ahead and we want to build offensive. So the first item that does come to mind is Blade of Ruin King. Why is Blade of Ruin King good on Trundle? It is because most of his damage does come from auto attacks. The active from the Blade of Ruin King does have synergy with his W plus the Spirit Visage, and it helps him gap close onto enemies who are getting away from him. A secondary offensive item to get on Trundle would be the Trinity Force, since you can constantly proc Sheen with your Q. Although not as optimal as say the Blade of Ruin King, since that does have synergy with his kit more. Another item that you also might consider is the Ravenous Hydra. This would be the third offensive item that I would consider getting, except for one problem. Trundle doesn't really have the greatest AD ratios, and so the bonus AD is somewhat not worth it since he just steals AD, and his only skill that scales with AD is his Q. But it does have its benefits, since he is an auto attacker, he'll be using the passive a lot. The lifesteal does synergy with his W and Spirit Visage, and he can use the active during the animation of his Q. But since his prime damage is by auto attacking, I'd say Blade of Ruin King is the winner here. Alright, so for the next champion example, we're going to be doing Vi. She is actually a champion who is very flexible on a lot of items. The first build path I like to call is the carry route, where she goes Triforce. This makes her an insane bruiser as she can keep proccing the Sheen for super burst damage with her E, and she also shreds the target's armor with the W, so the Sheen proc damage is enhanced along with her base damage, and she does have a bit of AP ratio on her E, so the Trinity Force is really good for Bruiser V. The next item build path, which I usually like to go and then into tanky, would be the Brutalizer. This build is more optimal for bursting down targets, as with armor penetration, your goal should be to rely on your base damage and using all your abilities to take down a target. And if we want to enhance the burst damage, then we would just build something in between the Last Whisper and Brutalizer, like I mentioned before, and then you would finish off with the Last Whisper to compensate for the AD and the armor penetration combo. Of course, this is not the optimal build since the carry route would be the Trinity Force, and you're also very squishy. But this build will be the most optimal for bursting down your enemies. Now, the next item I want to be talking about would be the Blade of Ruin King, and this item is something I would never get on Vi. The reason being is because she doesn't need more chase, as her Q does come up really often. She also doesn't rely on auto attacks to do her damage. She has her E for the burst, and of course her Q and R. The only time I would get Blade of Ruin King on Vi is say I was put in a situation where I had to keep 1v1ing someone. Then that would be the only time I would get this. Otherwise, Trinity Force is definitely the better purchase. Alright, so now let's talk about a bit of team composition, and let's say we had a Zed and Jinx. And then let's say we got our Brutalizer and then a Randuin's right after, since we want to be tanky. So what item would have good synergy with their team, since we do have 3 physical damage dealers? The best item that would be great right here would be the Black Cleaver. At this point in the game, the enemy is probably starting to build Zonias and, more armor, so it's time to support our team by shredding some armor. It's also pretty decent too, since we do get a bit of health, so that makes us a bit more tankier, and in prolonged fights we can start dealing damage again as ourselves, since we are shredding their armor. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're a tank and you want to help your physical damage dealers, then get a Black Cleaver. Alright, so next up we'll be talking about the one-shot build. Our prime examples here would be Jarvan and Rengar, who can one-shot squishy enemy targets. Alright, so first up we'll be talking about Rengar. So as you can see here, we would go Stalker's Blade into Mobility Boots, into a Brutalizer with a Tiamat in between, and then Last Whisperer. The reason you would get a Tiamat is because it helps with your burst combo for one-shotting enemies. As again previously stated, think of it as a spell that has a 1.0 AD ratio, and it fits in the combo mid-air when he's leaping onto someone. And then so right after 5 items we finally finished the Ghost Blade for extra armor penetration and chasing. And then the Ravenous Hydra, since we do not need the lifesteal, since we are one-shotting enemies and not sustaining our health to survive in team fights. And then I guess say Infinity Edge for more one-shot. With Jarvan, it is similar since he can use his Tiamat while in midair with his EQ combo. But the thing is, you might want to hold off the Last Whisper for a bit since his Q does do armor shred. So building more AD would be more valuable until a bit later in the game. And then you can finish off the same build as Rengar if you want to. Anyways, that is the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys haven't watched the defensive itemization guide, please do so by clicking this annotation right here. And if this video was very helpful to you guys, please leave a thumbs up or a comment below saying how much you appreciate it so that I know that it's actually helpful and that I wasn't actually wasting your time by making you watch this video, and of course my time by making this video. So yeah, thanks guys, hope you guys enjoyed it. I am Panzer Dragon, and we'll see you next time.